A couple of days ago, a Japanese review was released on the Panasonic GH6. Now, we can laugh all we want about premature releases, but I'm gonna be like Dave Chappelle on this one and say that this leak was released just on time. I gotta be honest, I was on the side of the fence that was sort of saying that the GH6 would never happen. But boy, have I never been so glad to be so wrong. Guys, this is the Panasonic GH6 and it's about to hit the market. Let's do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great. Yeah, yeah. I just wanna be great. Yeah, I just wanna be great.
So if you're new to the channel, my name is Tom and this channel is all about cameras. I simply adore cameras. Now, if you want to support a small YouTuber on his way, then a like would not only make my day, but it would make my entire week. And if you feel like watching more videos like this one, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Okay, let's get into it. I gotta say that the Panasonic GH5 is without a doubt my favorite camera of all time. True story. But since the GH5, I have moved on to Sony full-frame cameras and I sort of don't look at like brand loyalty and stuff. Sure, it's a hassle to change lenses and stuff like that, but I gotta say as an experience, the GH5 is a hell of a lot more fun to use than something like the Sony A7C. Sorry Sony, but that's the truth. And so yesterday I was just reading through some news about new camera releases and stuff, and I read about a new Canon camera coming out, a new Nikon, and it was just boring chit chat. I didn't really feel excited about it, but then I saw it, those three symbols, GH6, and I got really excited. It's not just a leak, because Panasonic has actually announced that there is a GH6 on its way and they actually have told us what the specs will be, but there will be a presentation on February 21st. That's going to be exciting, but we already pretty much have all the specs. And not only that, there was this Japanese review that I told you about that was also just released where we actually got to take a look at it and stuff like that, but it is in Japanese. I will put a link below in the video description so you can check out the camera for yourself. For copyright reasons, I can't show you images of the GH6 on this video, unfortunately, but I do want to share with you all the leaked specs. So first of all, it's still micro four thirds, which is awesome because I got a lot of these lenses lying around, and it is a very improved sensor which will be better at autofocus and it will have much better low light performance. Now when it comes to low light performance, I don't have any doubts that it's actually gonna be a lot better, because I think that that was pretty much my only complaint about the Panasonic GH5. The low light performance was just not good. Now, when we're talking about autofocus, I mean, there were so many firmware releases for the Panasonic GH5 and they worked on it and they made it better and it finally got to be really good, but there was always this sort of pulsing autofocus issue that just didn't look right. So most of the time it was just a hell of a lot easier to just do manual focus. Personally, for me, making YouTube videos, I simply just use the Panasonic app on my smartphone and I just tapped to focus and there were no issues. Like, you can definitely make it work, but I gotta say the Sony cameras definitely win when it comes to autofocus. It's just so much easier. It feels like too easy sometimes. The autofocus just always simply works, so I don't know. Now the design is pretty much similar, but there are a couple of important changes. First of all, it is a bit thicker and there is an explanation for that, and it is heavier. The GH5 was 635 grams and the GH6 will be something like 740 grams. So it's gonna be a bit heavier, but I've recently discovered that heavier cameras isn't necessarily a bad thing. You get a much more stable holding on it. And compared to something like my very compact Sony A7C, like, I don't like to use that thing. I'll be honest, like holding it handheld, it's just not very usable. But the grip on the GH5 and the GH4 was always just so nice to just hold. So I definitely am happy that they haven't done too many changes. Now regarding making it a bit thicker, it's because they've also included cooling fans inside of the thing. Because yes, obviously there is a completely new chip, just like on the GoPro Hero 10, and they're utilizing the capabilities of this chip. And in order to do that, they need really good cooling. This is something that Panasonic has been thinking a lot about, and that's why they have focused on making this work perfectly. There's not going to be any overheating whatsoever on this thing, that I am certain of. Another good news about the new design of the GH6 is that it will be using the same batteries, which is great because I have a bunch of these things lying around. Now, let's talk about the fantastic specs. So first of all, I think that the most exciting news is 4K 120 frames per second, which is wonderful. And I know some people will go like, yeah, but the Sony a7S III already has that, so what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that the Panasonic GH6, we don't know how much it's going to cost, but we can be pretty certain that it's not going to cost as much as the Sony a7S III, and so in my book that's going to be awesome. But wait, there is more. Apart from it being able to shoot in 4K 120 frames per second, it's going to do another GoPro thing. Yeah, it's going to be able to shoot in 5.3K in 60 frames per second. That's amazing. Now that's something that even the legendary Sony a7S III can't do, so I for one think that's super exciting. But wait, there is more. Forget about the fact that it can shoot in 5.7K, it can also record vlog 600 megabits per second, and that's a lot of information to handle, so that's going to be awesome. And also you can now be able to choose to record in Apple ProRes. Now it's not ProRes RAW, mind you that, but it is ProRes. And for those of you who have been working with ProRes, and this will probably mostly be Mac users who use Final Cut Pro, ProRes is absolutely wonderful to work with. So that is definitely a very welcome addition. Now apart from it being able to shoot in 4K 120 frames per second, it can also record in 300 frames per second. Nobody can really give me a definite answer on the resolution there, but I'm gonna guess that it's gonna be in 1080p. We'll have to wait and see until they finally unveil this bad boy. Now when it comes to pictures, let's be honest, the GH4 and the GH5 was never about pictures, but this bad boy, the GH6, will be able to take pictures in 25 megapixels. So that's gonna be really awesome. It's an interesting number, 25 megapixels. Like, you kind of wonder, is it to just brag and to say, oh, compared to some of the Sony cameras that can only shoot 24 megapixels, I think it's mostly that's why. Now, I personally have never had any issues when it comes to rolling shutter on the GH5, but the rolling shutter suspension will be highly improved on the GH6, so that's going to also be very interesting to see, especially when we're talking about these high frame rates and stuff like that. So that's going to be fun to see. Now they did do something very interesting about the flip out screen. So don't worry, it's still a flip out screen like on the Panasonic GH5, but with a twist, sort of. It's going to be a tilt swivel flip out screen, so you can tilt it a bit and flip it. So basically the best of two worlds. I know that there are some people who really prefer using a tilt screen because they can sort of look it down like this. They don't want to have to do like this. So I suppose for those people, that's going to be a dream. Now, two interesting details that I noticed about the new design, that the recording button on the GH6 is going to be much more red and very easy to spot if you just want to hit that record button. But the most interesting thing, and this is something I've actually considered for a couple of years, why don't they make a camera where they have a recording button on the front of the camera? Because most of the time we're vlogging like this, we YouTubers that is, and we can just hit that button and we can record ourselves. We don't have to go like, oh, it's somewhere on top here. You know, it just makes life so much easier. Now, when it comes to memory cards, it will still have the ability to shoot on 2 memory cards at the same time, but there is a bit of a twist here. So instead of 2 SD cards, there is 1 SD card and 1 CFast compact, probably because those cards are a bit faster to use when it comes to those high frame rates and bit rates and stuff like that. And so I understand why they had to put it in there. The Sony a7S III has the same thing, so it's very understandable. Now, as I mentioned before, Panasonic will have a launch day or presentation day. It will be February 21st, and they do have some other news, some abilities to upload directly to YouTube and stuff like that. They understand that the people who used the GH5 was mostly people who were YouTubers and content creators online, and so I think that they're gonna shape the camera to make it more interesting for content creators, sort of like the Sony ZV-1, which you know I'm a huge fan of. Now, some final thoughts. My prediction is that this camera is gonna sell extremely well unless YouTubers find out that there is some huge bug that they need to fix. I do not believe that Panasonic has solved the autofocus issue, because that's not just a question about software. It is a question about the sensor and the chip and the technology and stuff like that. I hope I'm wrong about this one though. I hope that they actually do fix the sensor and make the autofocusing good enough to compete with Canon and Sony, but I just have my doubts because we haven't seen it on the continuous versions of Panasonic cameras in the past, and so I just don't see that happening, but I am hopeful. Now when it comes to low light, let's be honest, this is still gonna be a micro four thirds sensor, very tiny, still bigger than 1 inch, but it is still tiny. And so I don't expect it to perform as good as, for example, a Sony full frame camera, obviously, but I think that there will be a substantial difference comparing it to this GH5, because a couple of years have passed and there are these noise canceling algorithms that can probably do a whole lot. And I think that Panasonic has been working a lot on this, or at least if they haven't, they bought up companies and taken the patents for it. So, you know, it's a win for us consumers anyway. But I think that this camera is going to be highly successful for so many reasons, but they really need to get the price right. Now, I'm going to guess that it's going to cost something like maybe somewhere in between $2,000 and $3,000, and it's understandable with inflation and everything. Personally, I don't really see a need for it right now. I'm actually quite happy with the GH5. I still use it to shoot B-roll with this thing. 4K 60 is more than sufficient for me. And if I need something faster than that, I usually use my GoPro or the Sony ZV-1. So I feel like my collection of cameras doesn't need this addition, but you never know. Sometimes I'll say these things, I don't need that, I'm not gonna get it, and then I get it. So we'll just have to wait and see how I'm gonna do about it. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about this camera, so if you want to leave a comment down in the comment section, it would be great. We can keep the discussion going down there. Now, if you want to check out how this GH6 actually looks, I'm gonna link to another video, not the original Japanese video, but another YouTube video. There's this YouTuber that has basically showed you what the camera looks like, and it looks pretty awesome. But in all honesty, it pretty much looks like the GH5, just a bit thicker and a few more red buttons, so to speak. Anyway, that's all I had for today. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. 'Cause I've been living life